Dear friends, in this video, I'll try to explain how we can do our architectural visualizations using artificial intelligence as of this date. We'll just go over one image here, and I'll try to show the current technologies, the technologies that we have available to us. Now, first of all, of course, if you have a chat-gpt membership or a Gemini membership, you can solve this within your own membership. Up to a point. I want to start from there first. Of course, a good angle will always be what we need in the first place. After placing the camera here, we need to adjust the camera angle very well, because the camera angle is actually a bit, let me put it this way, is the starting part and a very critical part. Because if you don't set the camera angle properly and don't make the right adjustment, your visual will definitely have a problem, it'll have an issue, and you won't get the result you want. For this, first of all, of course, where do I want to render from? Well, I'll do a render from here, from this area. I'm zooming in here. Then I'm making my camera perspective adjustment. So will it be wide angle or narrow angle? What will it be like? In this case, I want an angle like this. Specifically, I want a certain proportion of my visual to be covered by the landscape part. Because if you notice, if we show too much of the architectural project in the whole visual, but don't show the landscape and so on much, it's not a good thing, friends. You should choose something closer to the landscape, showing the landscape more. For example, these parts are greenery now. Well, at least a part of it is currently minimum green. We can assign green to other parts as well. Of course, we shouldn't come too much with perspective. In that case, we might encounter architectural errors. So something like this is actually good. Because in the middle area, there's an area roughly in the golden ratio where I can show the message I want to give. It's available, friends, as you can see. Of course, an angle like this is suitable by backing out a bit more like this. I want to determine this angle now. You can export this directly from the export section, from the 2D graphics section if you wish, as a two-dimensional visual. Now, let's look at our visual. Look, there's a visual here, as you can see. It already exports automatically in a 16:9 ratio. Now, how can we work with this visual using artificial intelligence? The point I want to draw your attention to here is this. Materials are determined, colors are determined. Some furniture references are also given here. Of course, artificial intelligence will recreate this. Therefore, using these references as well, let's see what we can do in the first place. Now you can use chat-gpt if you wish, or you can use Gemini. All of these are possible, friends, but only up to a point. I want to show this to you. For example, let's go to chat-gpt. Yes, we're in chat-gpt now, and we'll drag and drop our visual here. This is something we always do, we drop it. Let's say you want to visualize the image as a very realistic render. Try to imagine it in your mind, focusing on making it look as lifelike as possible, with plenty of details that make it feel real. Add those details in. Think about the textures, the lighting, and the small touches that bring the scene to life. Make sure it looks polished and complete, just like a professional architectural render you might see in a design magazine or an architect's portfolio. Now watch closely, because I'm going to take the same prompt and show you how it can be interpreted in this context. Of course, we go ahead and select the image generator for this one as well, just like before, and then we start it up. While the process is starting here, we're also going to head over to Gemini with this exact same prompt, guys, so you can see how it works in both places. In the same way, we add this image to Gemini, click Create Image, select Pro, and start it. The process is running here as well. Look, one render was processed here. It's already done. The other one was processed here. Now, I also want to bring the same render and use it here in Archifruit's AI, because here we're using it via the API. In the watermelon section, under Image to Image, we select GPT here. This time, we select and drag the same image here. And we write our prompt right here. But we're doing something here. We're selecting high for the GPT quality part, guys. See, we didn't have an option like this inside of GPT itself. But we have such an option here. We select that, then we set its mode to auto match. So it gives it in a way that fits what I provided, and we click Generate. Now when we look, we can very clearly see the image that GPT, meaning chat-gpt, created internally. Look, now, this image is nice, but you can see we have quality issues, especially where these details weren't fully calculated, quite clearly. The reason for this is, if you remember in render engines like Corona Render or Octane Render, the diffusion process, when it's too short, these kinds of flawed images appear. To get a higher quality image, diffusion needed to continue longer and the render time needed to increase. Now in AI, it actually works the same way. It works like this. However, since it creates a quick image here, it doesn't spend much time on diffusion and can erase our details like this. Look, our details over here have almost completely disappeared. Therefore, chat-gpt won't do the job for us. Guys, I mean, yes, it sees it like this, but we can't use it this way, especially if some architectural details disappear. That's a huge problem for us. And we'll have trouble trying to sharpen this kind of quality later on. Let's move on to Nano Banana. See, Nano Banana created a slightly better image. But again, when we download and look at it, for instance, this time it's a bit, let's look at it from within our SketchUp here. It slightly changed the colors of these wooden parts we see here. So it interfered with the colors too much. But when you look at it, this one seems to have been created more properly, especially these sharp areas, these parts. If you look at the details here in the realism, it's better. But when you zoom in, we can very clearly see that it's still not very sharp. So we're actually still experiencing a resolution problem here. But I can say it's more professional here. I mean, from an architectural visual standpoint, I can say it's more professional. Now let's also take a look at this together. Specifically, I want to show you the quality of the image from the chat-gpt image section, compared to what we get when using it through an API. I downloaded this image for us to examine. It looks a bit different in FreeU as well. Look, it's the same engine, but it's much higher quality here, especially if you look at these details here. The details on the edges and so on are much clearer, because here the AI is a bit more, look, you can see it very clearly when you look here. Since this is a paid transaction, it ran the engine a bit more here. Look, you can see it very clearly from the plants over here too. Let's zoom in like this. You can read the details very clearly from the plants on the edge in the back. Look, you can see the distortions right here. Let's take a look from this side. We can clearly see that you experience a very distinct loss of detail within chat-gpt itself, guys. For example, you can even tell from the grass. When you look at it like this, because the scan was so short, it creates a less detailed image. So why did I say this? I said it for this reason. Yes, you can do this in chat-gpt and Gemini, but for our architectural projects to be more realistic and for details to be preserved, API-based usage is required. If you want, you can use chat-gpt's own API by creating a software if you wish. If you wish, you can use Nano Banana's own API via aistudio.com or any third-party application like Archifruit's AI software. What we're actually doing here is using it through an API, guys. We're doing this to achieve this level of quality. Yes, because now we can create the quality you want here. Now let's move on to a second topic. We've created our visual. For example, let's say I really like this one here. But at the same time, I also liked chat-gpt's visual, this one it made. I mean, it's nice. I want to go with this one. Now this image is currently at a very low resolution, around 1500 pixels. In Archifruit's AI, we have a module like this, a module named Dragonfruit. This module actually, without distorting the original image at all, it can upscale the existing image, its material, everything as it is, to a resolution like 4K or 8K. For example, let's make it 4K now. I want to show you the difference between these two, guys. This is something very serious and important. Because normally when we upscale an image, we can clearly see that the details of this image get distorted. Look, for example, this image is currently 1920 by 1072 pixels. So it's an image in 2K resolution. Of course, many different settings can be made regarding the image within Photoshop itself. There are filters. You can try these. But unfortunately, these filters cannot perform an upscale at the quality I want because they distort it. I mean, it ruins the whiteness here, it ruins the facade, it can ruin the windows, it can ruin these details. So what I want is for these colors not to be distorted at all. I want it to upscale as it is. I don't want these plants to be distorted. I mean, I don't want this furniture or this light to be distorted, but I want it to be clearer. You'll understand exactly what I mean now. This is it. We can do this here with Dragonfruit. Now, when you look at it normally, it seems like there's no difference. But let's download this in 4K format. Let's bring it and drop it onto our image here. You'll see the difference very clearly now. Of course, since this isn't a 4K image yet, let's make it 3820. Let it enlarge so we can see the difference clearly. Look, this is how our image was originally. See how the image sharpens after passing through Dragonfruit. Especially if you look at these details, you can see very clearly how the image becomes detailed and sharp. For example, let's focus on that light from before. Look at the before and after. You can see how it cleared up. This is a module that seems to do nothing but does a lot, especially with the grass and the plants over here. It creates a very sharp, high quality, powerful image, guys. Now this is the first method. Regarding the sharpening of an image, A second method, we have a module here called pomegranate. This module actually sharpens the image and optimizes its lighting, and it also increases its pixel count at the same time. Let's try to calculate this as a 3278 6 megapixel image. Everyone. Look, I'm directly using the image I got from Watermelon, the one from chat-gpt. Without making any adjustments, you can just select light presets from here. I'm just leaving it to render as it is right now. Let's see when we want to do a 6 megapixel enhancement. We'll see together what kind of result it produces while working on light and clarity. In short, we need to put most of the renders we created in chat-gpt, Gemini, and Archifruits AI through this upscaling process. When we don't do this, unfortunately, our images aren't very usable. We can't send them to print. I mean, you can't send this image to print, guys. If you print this in a somewhat large format, when printed in a magazine or catalog, you'll unfortunately see images like this. So, for example, let's zoom in on this. See, you'll get blurry images like this. Instead, you need to see much clearer images. Dear friends, that's why we must perform the upscaling process correctly and without fail. Now I'll also open a different Archifruits AI and process the same image with one of the classic upscaling tools. For instance, we'll use our image from the chat-gpt image in our Papaya model. Here we're performing a somewhat creative upscaling process. If we want, we can have it generate a prompt here. The system automatically reads the image and generates a prompt for us. This generated prompt is what's needed to bring this image to a high resolution state. We don't bother with writing it manually. You set the scale factor from here. Let's make this one a 4K image as well. Maybe let's increase it a bit more. Let it be a 5K image. Detail, I'm giving it a medium level of detail. Maybe it can process in high res too. Without touching the values here, I'm starting the process again. Now we'll clearly see the difference between these three processes. This one also creates a 4K image as well, guys. But this enhancement, Crystal Enhance, works with a very different logic. I want you to know this too. Dear friends, our pomegranate module. So we can see the result of the pomegranate module here. Now we'll clearly see how realistic and how impressive this module is right here. Let's download these two and we'll layer them on top of each other like this, so that we can evaluate it clearly. Its resolution is a bit low, we can enlarge it, no problem. Let's go ahead and enlarge it just like this, everyone. Now, for the sake of clarity and to make things easier to follow, let's label this one as pomegranate. This way, it will be much clearer for all of us as we move forward. So we'll be able to see the results right here a little later on, everyone. Now let's call this one dragon fruit, naming each of them after our favorite fruits so we can keep track of everything more easily. You'll learn over time what each fruit actually does. Now, I don't know if you've noticed something. Look, pomegranate actually adjusts the lighting too, unlike Crystal Enhance. So it doesn't just upscale, it also touches up the lighting. It turns the light into a more impressive, more realistic sunset atmosphere that fits the scene. As you can see, there's a very important point here. Look, this is a complete regeneration. Therefore, the visual you create here won't be exactly the same as this one. It creates new plants, new surfaces, and new facades, but it still does this while sticking to your standards. The fact that it can do this is truly incredible. Especially if you look closely at the window frame details here. Look, the new version is much more refined. The curtains in the background and so on are much more realistic and neat. The furniture here and such, of course there are errors here. We'll fix those in a bit. It's possible. So in this case, I'd choose pomegranate, guys. This turned out to be a very nice image and the details are quite realistic. And we now have a total 4K visual, which is also quite nice. Well, after the pomegranate process, if we want a bit more clarity, you'll see here when you zoom in that there's some loss of sharpness. So yes, let's look, the original is like this, pomegranate is like this, good. But for example, when you look at Crystal seems much clearer. Where can we see that specifically? Let's look at this area a bit more closely. Crystal, original, and pomegranate. Actually, pomegranate is quite clear, but we also have a chance to make pomegranate even sharper, guys. I want to try that too. So I'll run the result we got from pomegranate through dragon fruit this time. So don't get confused, actually. After the process here, after working in chat-gpt or Gemini, I suggest doing a pomegranate process first and then finalizing it with dragon fruit 4K. This way you'll see for yourself that we've reached true quality. There's another thing here. This is, of course, the process we just did in the Papaya module. In some cases, this can be very useful, but I want to say it's very risky in others. Let's see the differences in this too. Let's go back to Photoshop. and import it. And let's see the difference very clearly, friends. Let's put it on top. Let's put this on top too, like this. Let's write papaya on this one, friends. Yes. Now for the papaya module, of course, we need to set the opacity to 100%. Yes. Now, as you can see in papaya, everything might look much more contrasted and realistic, but don't let that mislead you. Because when you look at the difference from the original image, really, especially in the details, in the textures, you see that it even made changes to some architectural details. This might not always be what we want. For example, look here. Our light wasn't anything like this. Our light was a modern light, but it can turn it into this. Like this, for example, when we look at this area, it can create unwanted details like these. Maybe you can use this as a mask. For instance, you could use it for the plants and such. But I don't recommend using this all the time. It's very risky, especially in architecture. Instead, dragon fruit is much clearer, much more accurate, and much more flawless, friends. Of course, I also mentioned that dragon fruit is much better than pomegranate. First pomegranate, then the addition we call dragon fruit. We'll do one more example, of course, I'll show you. But for now, let's take the image we just processed with pomegranate. And let's see together what kind of result we get when we finalize it here with dragon fruit, that is crystal sharpening. Look, there's pomegranate at the bottom, and here's the version processed with crystal upscale. Look, crystal upscale is like this. Before crystal upscale, pomegranate is like this. There's really an incredible difference in clarity. So friends, our path is this. When we create any image in chat-gpt or Gemini, in Artifruits here, we'll sharpen our image first with pomegranate, then with dragon fruit, and finally wrap this up. Okay, good, great, we've sharpened our image. So right now, let's see pomegranate in its final state. We want to use this with crystal upscale, friends. Now let's save this. Let's save it to the desktop like this, dear friends. Let's call it final, okay? Now we have errors here. There are some things we want to change. How can we do those, for example? For example, the top of the balcony or terrace here is already covered. It's very silly that it put this here. This area, it might make much more sense if it were outside. So we need to make some changes to this area. How can we do these? We can certainly work on these in Photoshop. For example, look, let's select this area in Photoshop. We selected it proportionally, whatever. I'm going to the generative fill section. And here we can make selections. And sometimes we can even select Nano Banana Pro here, but I can't find it right now. I didn't understand why, because it's actually in my final solution too, but I still couldn't always get the result I wanted here, friends. Even if I can, I end up having to do it one by one. So I'll select this area. I'll perform an operation here. I'll say generative fill. I'll select the model from here, and so on. This is possible. For example, we can definitely do something like this. What I'm saying is, for instance, you could create the terrace furniture right here, in this area, in a way that is even more modern and flawless than before. Okay? Now, the system automatically crops the area I've selected here and performs a special process on it. And it carries out a modification or a revision for me based on my request. This is good. This is possible. But unfortunately, if you need this in many parts of an image, it can become quite a nightmare. Also, as you can see, it can do some really nonsensical things too. So there's no way we can use it like this. It's not possible. Therefore, since I couldn't get very good results in Photoshop, dear friends, we developed a module. And now I'd like to introduce this module to you, the carrot module. The carrot module is for our final image. This could be a 4K image or an 8K image, but I don't recommend low resolution. For example, in a 4K image, let's make a selection at a 1:1 ratio using our area field enrichment tool. Look, I'm selecting and doing the same thing here. I've selected this area just like this, making sure to highlight exactly what I want. Now, what I'm saying is, please go ahead and recreate the terrace furniture in a flawless, perfect way, making sure that every single detail is just right and nothing is overlooked. I said this for this part, of course, friends, but we have a ratio problem here. Let's close this. If you wish, you can give a special revision here by selecting this whole area, this entire section. To this whole area, that is. Recreate the terrace furniture flawlessly. Remove the sun loungers. Remove the umbrella. Remove the light. The terrace should be much more modern. Let it be clean and organized. Don't mess up the architectural details, for example, I said. I gave a revision like this for this part. So what other kind of revision do I want to give? For instance, in this upper part, look, in this upper part, I want people to be sitting here. Look, let there be furniture on the balcony here and some pots, plants. Then people. 2. I gave details like that. Besides that, for example, I can give another revision here. I can write it here. In the same way here too. So I'm giving the same revision here. Notice that I'm doing it by cutting it into pieces. Why am I doing this? Because if we were to revise this image as a single image, the system would unfortunately drop it back to 2K resolution. In other words, it will drop it to the resolution of the image we created here with Banana, chat-gpt, or Gemini. This is a nightmare. Therefore, we don't want this. We want to preserve the resolution, but also want to make revisions at the same time. We want to make some revisions. For example, our client requested some revisions from us. So without recalculating the local image, we can make revisions just by making local selections. What's important here is that if you noticed, we last went through the crystal upscale process. We can mark it here. When you mark this, the revisions here will also go through the crystal upscale process. Of course, your credit amount will increase a bit, but in the end, you'll have revised the visual in its original quality, friends. I haven't checked this box for now. Maybe we'll see the difference. Let's see what the result will be. Now, the system will process these 3 revisions piece by piece and give us the final visual, friends. Yes, dear friends, look. The revision has taken place. It removed the umbrella here, but assigned another terrace sofa set in its place. For example, it did this part separately instead of how you see it here. Of course, we didn't want this, so we actually couldn't get the revision we wanted here. Because why? Since we chose a general revision and a general area, it couldn't understand the subject. Actually, if we had just selected here and given the revision, the subject would have been understood. Anyway, for example, look, the revision was carried out very nicely on the upper side. When you look right here on this upper side, you see that the revision has been carried out there too. The mistake we made here was actually due to being a bit hasty. If we had given 2, we could have spent a bit more credit, but in the end we could have obtained the revision, no problem. For example, let's download this part again like this. We'll perform a revision process here again with the same logic. Let's upload this again like this. And let's say, friends, look, I'm selecting this area. Of course, we'll do this with area field. I'll select this area and say that the begin by removing all of the existing furniture from the terrace to clear the space. Once the area is open, bring in a dining table and arrange several chairs around it. This new setup will create a comfortable and inviting spot for people to gather, enjoy meals together, and make the most of the outdoor terrace environment. And a family eating dinner there. Look, pay attention. There's a very important point here, friends. We're making this revision, but our original resolution isn't compromised at all. This is a very seriously important thing, friends. Therefore, we can simply and quickly revise our visual as we want with the incoming revisions. Look at the top, it's very nice. We immediately had the details we wanted added, so there was no distortion in the visual either. Again, we had the details added here on the upper side as well. We're submitting the revision now. Yes, dear friends, look, as you can see, it changed this part again and turned it into a dining table. And the family is eating nicely here, as you can see. Great. It actually created the image we wanted. Now let's download it. Look, our quality is still 4K. The 4K wasn't compromised in any way. When we come here and drop our visual back on it, you'll see very clearly that the quality isn't compromised, dear friends. But of course, the people here, the people over there, could be made more realistic. I thought about this too. I said, yes, everything might have turned out great, but let's see what more we can do with the people. Therefore, there are some Caret module features for this as well. Let's look at those too. We want the people to be very realistic too. What do we do this time, friends? We select the area where the people are, like this. Of course, this time we select area clarity. Here again, just where this person is and where that one is. We can even select both of them together. It won't make much of a difference because this is a very small area. No need to select the distant ones. They won't be seen very clearly anyway. And if you wish, you can do this selection not just for people, but for some details you need here too. I don't know, like for the plants over there or for this spot, it doesn't matter. I'll leave it at that for now. And here again, I'll try to make just the people's faces, the people, more realistic, specifically. The people and their surroundings, of course. This area will be used to sharpen it completely. It'll make it more realistic, everyone. Once that's done, our image will truly become a high-quality architectural visualization. And moving on from here, well, we've learned how to handle the revisions too. And finally, let's say they didn't like the light and want a revision regarding the lighting. How can we revise the light while maintaining this quality without compromising it? If we move to that question, let me show this detail here again before we do. Let's clearly understand the difference, everyone. Like this. Yes, everyone like this. Closely. Look, now when we zoom in, you see the people are much more realistic before and after. If you want, you can use the brush on these areas again. You can do that in Photoshop. I mean, as you can see, some issues can occur around these edges because it sharpens all the edges. So you can balance it out like this. Look, when you look here, we can see that the people are created in a very realistic way. Very clear. As I said, you can, for example, undo these areas again. Okay, now this process is complete. So when you ask how we can change our light again, the only thing we'll do here is use our pomegranate module again. We can use this. We'll use our high pixel value again, and from the preset section, well, let's say we want to change it to a night atmosphere, or how should I put it, an orange light atmosphere. How can we do it? This is the easiest method we'll see, just by preserving details and resolution. After this, maybe we can just do a dragon fruit process. Maybe we can add people too. It depends, but when you want to change the light in these 4K and 8K images, you need to use this module. Let's see the result here and end the video. Dear friends, as you can see, the process is complete and our light has changed, a different light mode, and our quality remains almost exactly as it was. Let's download it and take another look. Well, maybe the only thing we'll do here is another crystal upscale process. Let's take another close look like this to see the difference. Let's zoom in, everyone. Let's do this, of course. When we look, even when we zoom in, we see very clearly that there's just a tiny sharpness issue in our image. We can fix that easily or even use it as is. So we can add different lights and different modes from here. If you wish, you can provide a reference image here. So when you provide any image as a reference here, the system will automatically transfer its lighting settings to your own image. Here, I don't know. Maybe a very beautiful, nice lighting atmosphere that you really like. Let's say you chose something like this. You click Generate Prompt, and the system transfers the lighting mode of this image to your own image. It creates a new prompt here. And with this prompt, when you click Enhance Image again, you get a different visual lighting. That's it, friends. I hope it was helpful. Ultimately, yes, AI makes our job much easier, but to get something truly high quality, there are still a few ways to achieve it. It doesn't seem very possible right now to get a high-quality image directly and quickly, because AI models currently only produce 2K images as a native format. Since producing images like 4K or 8K is not possible at the moment, or even if it does, it's fake, so we unfortunately lose these details. That's what I can say. I hope it was helpful. Take care of yourselves.